So Chris, we are live, coming to everyone after the very big OpenAI stream announcement. Was it big to you? Did it feel big?
Deadline, they're like, what are we gonna say? It's like, oh, just show them the demo. You know, just show them the
I
demo.
just realized I had you on mute, so a great start to the live stream. Do you want to say it again?
No, I refuse to share my opinions after that.
Oh, okay.
And it's gonna be bad me insulting their presentation after ours was such a disaster. But no, I thought that it felt a little bit like a university group presentation for a project they've just finished the night before, where they're like, we've got to show something. Let's just show the demo of the voice thing.
I also, just for the audience, why I was laughing was Chris said they brought out the B team. They seem pretty switched on to me. I've got to say, like, initial reaction is absolutely blown away by that real-time vision. I think that was the big thing for me, or the takeaway. I think the voice, we've seen Hume AI recently. That's the emotive sounding voice with pretty good interruptions as well. The low latency of that model and the vision capability were clearly the standouts of what was announced. Now, I know we are recording this and we're going to put it out there as a podcast as well. So I do want to clarify a few of the things quickly that we just heard from OpenAI's Spring Update event, and then we'll also bring up the chat on the screen as well, so people can talk and interact and give us their impressions as well. So we got an announcement for oh, sorry, GPT-4o. I don't know, Omni something it stood for. I think Omni model. That's it. GPT-4o, an Omni model version, I believe, of GPT-4. So this is obviously what has been chat or GPT-2 dash chatbot that we saw in the store. It's their newest flagship model, so it's not obviously GPT-5, but you can obviously see where they're going from this. It incorporates text, voice, and vision reasoning. They say it's cheaper and faster for developers. I know many of our listeners are developers. They can apparently start building today with GPT-4o, so that'll be really
Well, I
interesting.
can't. I've logged into my account, checked the API. I definitely don't have access to it.
Hey,
I'm a
it's still
paying
today. It's still today. 50% cheaper, 2 times faster, 5 times higher rate limit. The real question I have there is, do developers get access to this voice technology? Can they use this low latency voice capability just like OpenAI demonstrate? And will they get that low latency with the vision as well? Because if they do, that's going to open up a whole new world of apps.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I the thing is that I've actually seen all of these different technologies working before. Like I've actually built my own voice-based assistant using a similar technique to what they demonstrated there. What was impressive about their demo, in my opinion, was the latency. If that's real, that's really impressive. But I couldn't help but feel like some of it seemed a little scripted. It seemed too able to judge the emotion of the situation that they were in without actually deducing it from the text. Like it just seemed a little bit too perfect to me. I mean, I must admit they did have some hallucinations later in the presentation I took note of. So maybe that does sort of point to it being authentic. And the thing that I found difficult when I was working on voice capabilities was getting the interruptions right. Because if you're recognizing the person's voice, knowing what like how much of a buffer to leave before you then send it off to the model to process is really difficult, because if you cut them off too soon you might miss part of what they're saying, but if you let it run too long the latency will be too big. And it seems to me, if we take that demo on face value, that they've completely solved that issue, which makes that voice interaction much more usable.
I think the voice interaction's incredible. I did think we would see from that event, as was leaked earlier, some code around voice calling. I mean, you and I have discussed this on the podcast since the early days of the show, that idea from a model where it could go off and obviously do tasks for you. And I think presumably that's next, what we'll see from them, where this voice assistant can go off and truly call a restaurant and make a booking. But as we know, that technology does exist today, but to package it up in their app with access to all those free users and all people around the world having access to that technology is pretty game changing. On that side, we saw that one of the big announcements, or something they got excited about, was this, what I call like a Facebook type scale of rollout here, where they're going to have a, basically in the free version now you'll have access to GPT, so everyone can finally use Laundry Buddy, which is great news. Free users can now also use vision, memory, web browsing. So I think that's probably lining up for their all-knowing seeing voice engine. And paying customers just get 5 times more capacity. I guess that's the sell
Yeah,
to
I
us.
think that, I mean, yeah, all that stuff is fine. And that's just, I guess, being competitive with Google, who's set to make announcements tomorrow. But I found that the real exciting parts of what they announced today was it's the first time I've seen proper multimodality, in the sense that it could take in what he was saying along with the vision and give a combined answer and hold that context across multiple messages. And I think that's a really exciting part of it, because what I've seen so far in different applications, including our own with Sim Theory, is being able to get the AI model or program or whatever you want to call it to understand the relative strengths of the context you've got and take those into account, is difficult, and they seem to have nailed it there. Like that part of it, to me, the multimodality is really good. Like we saw it with the when he was working on the code as well, being able to take in the screen. Clearly, they've got the speed to the point where you can do some sort of, live voice, live vision interaction. And I think it's a real window into what we're going to see in the future of all models, not just theirs.
Yeah, it is interesting to see this whole coming together finally of text, voice, and vision. And I think one of the interesting things, you knew whatever demo they were going to give was to try and trump whatever Google has announced or will announce. And we saw that video when Google first unveiled Gemini. I don't know what it was actually called at the time, where the guy holds the ducks under the camera and he's like, "What am I holding? How many ducks?" And it's reasoning with him. And everyone got really excited. I know I did before I realized that it was just completely faked. But you could see Google's vision in that video for where they wanted to take this, like their dream of an assistant. And I know that this is something they've talked about for a very long time. But what OpenAI just did right before their own conference tomorrow is said, actually, we've built this. So there is a part of me that reflects on it and says, well, okay, they've got it on the phone, but it's whoever controls the distribution here. And the main use case for this voice assistant is going to be the phone, right? Like on the desktop of a day in a workplace. I'm not going to sit and chat to this thing.
Yeah, I actually made that note during the thing. It's like, I'm not going to talk to some perky American all day, like on my desk while I'm at work with other people. Like, it just seems like a very inefficient form of communication, especially because it loves to be like, hey, what a great problem you've given me. It's like, I just don't know if I could cope with that all day. And I know you can say, oh, okay, talk like an angry peasant woman to me or something like that. And then it'll be like really solemn or something like that. It's like, oh, another day, another dollar. Here's the answer to your problem. But it's just like, it's such a verbose and tedious way to interact with anyone, let alone an AI model that wants to help you so badly.
I think obviously the new capabilities around voice, the low latency, and that real time vision. I think for me, they're the definite standouts. But it does seem like the new model GPT-4o has not really lifted the ceiling. And I mean, I think we saw this with GPT-2 chatbot. Like it's a bit better. I don't think it's a lot better. And we also saw it hallucinate live in that demo.
Yeah, there was several hallucinations when they showed it the graph of the temperatures, right? They showed the graph. It had a scale on the left which was in Celsius, they said, although it was unlabeled. And then they had the wiggly line of the temperature. It actually referred to rainfall. It said, "Oh, there was a big rainfall event in September." Now, the graph wasn't about rainfall at all, and I checked and it wasn't mentioned at all. So that's a pretty huge mistake to make on the vision front. And it also answered the question in Fahrenheit. And then the lady, the CTO, asked, "Is what scale is this in?" And they said Celsius. So either it was converting it live, which okay, kind of cool, but or it's just wrong, and it just didn't really give you a lot of trust in its interpretation. We also saw it hallucinate when he asked, "Oh, hey, what mood am I in?" And it's like, "You're a piece of wood." It's like, "Oh, okay." Oh, it must be referring to that image I put in earlier. It's like, so, even in their demo, they're having issues. Now, the thing is, while that's a screw up, as you pointed out to me, doing live demos is hard, and of course, it's going to make some mistakes. And secondly, what we're talking about here really is the future of this technology. Like, they're not going to get it perfect on the first run, and we shouldn't judge them by that. It's just more, okay, this is the direction we're seeing in terms of where they're advancing. And to me, the exciting part of that, and I might be being a little repetitive, is just that they have the model at a point where they could interact with it in at a pace that is actually achievable. Like you would actually use that to interact in that way. Whereas before, those demos are either truncated or contrived, or they're just too slow to be practical.
What I don't really get though is like the technology, especially someone mentioned in the chat, like a call center and businesses can roll this out in a customer service. The thing is they already have and have been for years. And like I know it's not an ideal experience, but they don't care. Like as long as they can not put a human in the role. They don't really care. Like it will be a big improvement for us
Well, and we've shown
interacting.
it ourselves. The thing is, everything degrades on the phone. The quality's lower. People are used to bad connections. People are used to repeating themselves. Honestly, a lot of the people who call centers are a bit slow themselves. So it's totally achievable to put the technology in those places. But I think this goes far beyond that. I think there are a lot of people who, I mean, I do it when I'm in my car, for example. Like I always use Google Home with the audio function to search for directions or some information I want to know. But now you've got to the point where if you had this through your car's audio, for example, then I could see a lot of value in this. Like I could actually be doing research or learning or anything. And the other thing we didn't mention, which I thought was probably the single most impressive part of the demo, was the live translation where he said, can you please, anytime you hear Italian, reply in English, and whenever you hear English, reply in Italian? And it did it completely seamlessly, perfectly, actually. And I can imagine many thousands or hundreds of thousands of people being in that scenario where you're over in Japan and you want to order some sushi. No one, no one speaks English. I mean, that's extremely valuable. And at that level of latency, it's a babblefish, you know? It's the ultimate.
It really is a babblefish. But hasn't the Rabbit R1 already solved these
The
issues?
Rabbit R1 hasn't solved anything. It's a piece of shit, and they should just chuck them all in the bin,
Oh
admit
my
that it was
god.
a cash in, and just piss off and let the
Uh,
pros do it. Because, like, honestly, everyone has it in their pocket already. You've already got audio and video capabilities. They've put it in an app. The Rabbit R1 was a cash in. There's no future for it. Like,
the
honestly,
hilarious thing is everyone at the time was saying, the Rabbit R1, that's that orange device,
quit.
should be an app. And OpenAI comes out and essentially releases the future in an app. What do you think about now? There's rumors and speculation that they've signed a deal with Apple. And if you're Apple and you get a demo of this and you've dreamt that Siri would be like this forever and you've been too busy, cashing checks for the past decade and haven't innovated, then you're probably thinking, like, we want this. Like, we're going to, we
I mean,
need
let's
this.
face it, Siri is probably one of the worst applications ever developed. I've never seen anyone use it for any real purpose. Maybe sending a text message to the wrong person or something like that. So this would be a huge step up for Apple to get the capability we just saw, especially if it's capable of doing things on the phone. So one thing that they didn't mention in that presentation was tool use. Now, I feel like that what we saw there at that level of speed and that level of understanding um, would be perfectly capable of operating tools, which means doing things for you on your phone. So that really opens up a lot of possibilities. Like if it's able to do proper vision, and I think it will be, then we know that it can then essentially do anything because it can browse the web, it can operate applications on your phone, which means it'll be capable of doing tasks that they don't even foresee because you can say, okay, open my share trading app and go buy some shares in Apple. And I could imagine it being able to do that and confirm with you and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point with the tool use and where this can potentially go as this true everything app where now it can see the computer and that low latency. We talked about low latency being one of the hurdles that needed to be overcome in order to do this kind of stuff. All of a sudden, it can access the desktop, potentially access the phone. But I think this is where they're going to hit like a pretty hard wall in that strategy, which is to access the phone, to access the apps, to access your desktop. I mean, they've got Microsoft sort of on their side here with Windows PCs, but everything else is Apple. So maybe this deal is sort of saying you can access the underlying functions of the computer to operate it, because I just can't see why, if I'm Apple and I have all the distribution, I've got all the devices in pockets, I've got the computers, and I'm Google with Android, why I'm going to give up that advantage. So they might have the best technology here to roll out the greatest, Star Trek computer in existence. But if you don't have access to the end terminals, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, well, Apple, it's particularly tricky on Apple because they're notoriously difficult to get access to anything that's outside of the sandbox of your application. But I think the the potential for the power of this is so much that you may see that partnership overcome that barrier. Certainly on Android, it's possible, and definitely on desktop. But we also must note that they're giving developer access to this technology, which is really huge if you think about it. Because you mentioned a Star Trek computer, we're going to be at the point where really you can build these applications that have deep understanding of the person that they're interacting with, especially when you take into account memory and things like that. And you're going to be able to interact with an intelligence. And like we've talked about it for ages, and like, we haven't really had time to digest this announcement. And my initial reaction was, okay, it's an incremental combining of the technologies, but this is the first time we've actually seen that dream of just being able to interact with this thing. Like, it really is amazing. Like, if we go back just 1 year and we're happy that it can make coherent sentences finally and write in English and cheat on your essay or whatever. And now here we are talking to something that can express emotion, whether real or synthetic or whatever it is. It's just mind blowing that they were able to do that so casually in a demo.
I think where this really opens up, I mean, this has never really been about the GPT store, in my opinion. What it is about is these tools and knowing which tool to use, and companies, I guess, paying OpenAI. And this is how I think they'll get their free version. Because it's like, you want to book a holiday with the free assistant, well, you have to use Airbnb. Or, you want to book a flight, you're only booking on United or Alaskan because they're the ones that have paid us. So to me, I really think that might be one strategy of monetizing this if it becomes sort of the new, I don't want to call it search engine, because I agree, it's like, it's not a search engine now. It's just computer. Like, the closest analogy I can give is just in Star Trek, where there's just the computer's omnipresent. It's like everywhere, which the Omni model name now rings a bell. The question I have for you about all this, though, is while we get excited, these things are always harder to mass distribute and get into everyone's hands. What happens if Google tomorrow announces the same thing, and they can deploy it to every Android phone as the default?
Well,
Does
I think that'd
anyone?
be friggin' fantastic. I have no loyalty to these guys. Like, I think that if the technology's there and we can get it from multiple angles, so much the better. The last thing we want is one company controlling it all. And I really feel like Gemini is pretty good, like in my experience, and it's pretty good at multimodal. And they've already shown that it can effectively do live live vision, because you can pass it in like a 1 hour video and it's perfectly capable of understanding that. Google's always been really, really good at the voice interaction with languages and things like that, even prior to having Gemini. So it would make sense that Google's going to have something just as good in this respect. Maybe their model isn't quite as good in terms of understanding and things like that, but I think that we're going to see it from Google as well. There's absolutely no doubt that this is where it is. But a point I wanted to make is I feel like OpenAI are at their best when they're focused on these core technologies rather than things like the GPT's store. They're not application developers. They're not good at web stuff. What they're good at is providing the core technology as a platform and allowing people to build with that. So I do take your point about them, say, having some vendor lock in on use the official Airbnb skill or whatever. But I think a lot of that will be bypassed by developers who just take the technology and turn it into interactive agents that can do other things outside of the little sandbox that is OpenAI GPTs.
Yeah, to me, this is, and Sam Altman alluded to it in the All In podcast interview about how, this really is them building a platform layer or a series of tools that will be really hard to compete with. And you can totally see, once you have potentially plugins for this thing or function calling, and that means that it can go and do things in other apps, and developers can build experiences to get things done, whether you're in your car or like on the
Yeah, and I
go.
think that, like, you showed me your glasses the other day, what are they called? The live vision glasses, whatever the hell they are.
Meta Ray-Ban something.
That's it. And I really feel like we're going to be at the point. I remember years ago, I was in Berlin before I spoke a bit of German, and I was looking at a menu, and someone showed me the Google capability where you just hold the camera up and it live translates the menu into English. And we're now actually realistically at the point where with those vision kind of glasses, you could have language live translated wherever you go. But not only that, you could speak in English and have a little speaker play it out in the native language in the country you're in and like fully facilitate live translation. I mean, think about it. They still have interpreters in all the UN stuff and on TV and things like that. That is completely superseded by this. Like that capability alone is just so powerful. It's at the speed that they've got, and I think that's really what this announcement was amazing today. Is just the speed. Every time I've tried this, and I've tried it a lot to do these like interactive things, you've either got to use a worse model, which is one way of doing it. So, for example, not that I'm saying it's much worse, but like if you use Grok with Llama 3 now, you get a pretty fast response. Then you've got the sort of voice to text time to get the text in. You've got the inference, then you've got the text to voice. To have those three steps run at the speed that they've got on the latest and best model available that we know of, that presumably ranks the highest, is incredible. And I think that that's really the thing that's blowing me away here is that it's a leap forward in speed, assuming what we saw in the demo is not scripted.
Yeah, I also think we shouldn't underestimate, and I know we've said it earlier, but this low latency idea of the fact that by sort of appling this, you know how Apple own the ecosystem and so they can deliver a much better experience. I think that that's what we're seeing here with OpenAI because they're controlling all of the different technology pieces. And unlike us, you know, trying to buy a pressure cooker from a hardware store, trying to piece all these things together where it introduces huge latency, you know, that's probably why they're able to get the experience so great. But to speed up GPT-4, I mean, what I don't understand is if they've been sitting on this for so long, why, as a paid ChatGPT customer, is the web interface so slow? You know, are they just had they deprioritized
Well, I
resources
mean,
to
that's
it?
the other trick, right? Like, it's possible for that demo, they had dedicated hardware available for their demo. Remember, he mentioned, oh, the reason we have this cable plugged into the phone is because of stable internet. Now, who's to say he isn't directly connected to some local cluster to make sure that the latency is really low? I also noticed the sort of shout out to Jesus at the end where they said, thanks to Nvidia Jensen for the GPUs, you know, and it makes you wonder, do they have some prototype GPU that's sort of Grok like? Um, because that might make sense. You know, it might make sense that they have some way to get the inference faster so they're able to run those bigger models at much greater speed, reducing that latency.
I
So
love how everyone has to pay their respects to Jensen at the end of anyone in AI, like, thank you. And now a short prayer to Jensen.
yeah, and they always repost that photo of him delivering the first one to Elon Musk. I mean, it makes sense. If he's delivering the platform that makes all this possible, then you might say thank you for that. But it did seem a little bit like she had to say that. That wasn't from the kindness of her own heart. That was a 100% a sort of paying homage to the guy who enables you.
So I want to take a step back in time now. So 6 years ago, and I already talked to you about this prior to this event, but I think it's worth sharing with everyone listening is 6 years ago, I got really, you know, excited about the future and thought, wow, okay, this can change the world if AIs can actually interact with the world that we're already in and make calls and you know, like basically be like us and take away like that silly busy work where you don't have to get, say, a restaurant to sign up to OpenTable to book. You can just make a call. I rarely go out, so I don't know why I'm so
Yeah,
excited
I was
about
gonna
this
say
use
it's the
case.
biggest problem in your life booking restaurants for
Yeah,
like
apparently. But listen to this.
See how may I help you?
Hi, I'd like to reserve a table for Wednesday the 7th.
For 7 people?
It's for 4 people.
4 people when today,
Next
tonight?
Wednesday at 6 p.m.
Oh, actually we reserve for like upper like 5 people.
So that's enough to really get the the vibe of it, but that was from Google I/O 6 years ago, where they demonstrated this idea of making the reservation using Google Assistant, and they were going to release it. I'm not sure if it was just a example demo and it never really worked in reality, but this was 6 years ago. They had the inflections, they had the speed, allegedly. It does sound real to me, and in the disclaimers they said it was recorded live and not scripted, like it was the AI, so take it at face value. But at the time, I remember it blew everyone away, but we just never got it. And a lot of the reason I think we never got it was just the fear. Like, Google didn't want to release it because people were concerned about, you know, assistants everywhere making these calls and wasting people's time or you know, doing silly things. And so I think what's interesting now with what we're seeing from OpenAI, and I'm not downplaying it in any way because the underlying GPT-4 model is obviously tremendously better, but they've had this technology for a long time.
Yeah, I guess that's true. The main thing now, I suppose, is the generality of it. Like, it's not dedicated to one purpose. This can be anything, and it can do it in near real time. I was interested in your thoughts on why she emphasized free so much. Like, because that was a really, it kept sort of coming back to, oh, this is for our free users, this is about for our free users, but also devs will have access. Why do you think they've come back to the free users?
Oh, I think because they want to take on Google and they want to be the next search engine product, whatever that may look like in the future. I think that's so obvious. It's like, get it into as many hands as possible, keep all the attention. I mean, they've got all the attention. I mean, we're literally live streaming after their event, and we're not, you know, we're potentially not doing that for Google, right? Like, it's like they've got all the attention, and so it's a case of get this into everyone's hands, make OpenAI the brand of the future, or ChatGPT, or whatever you want to call it, where that's the expectation. It's like when you buy a car and people are like, oh, but it doesn't have Android Auto or Apple AirPlay. I think maybe in the future when you buy a phone, it's like, well, if it doesn't have ChatGPT, I'm not buying the phone. And I think that's one way they can penetrate into devices, which is, you know, by everyone using it and having that expectation, the relationship with this chatbot, then
Yeah, well,
you know.
didn't you tell me the other day that there was some poll or whatever about whether people even know about other models other than ChatGPT? It seems like for the general public, ChatGPT is AI. Like, that is it. There is no alternative. It is the thing. And this further solidifies that.
Yeah, so someone just pointed out in the chat, I wanted to thank them for that. There's a whole bunch of these demo videos now live on OpenAI's YouTube. So you've got things like fast counting, dad jokes. The examples are pretty bad.
Is Laundry Buddy on there?
Yeah, that would be good. They're playing rock, paper, scissors with it, with the vision. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
Let's watch that. Let's watch their game.
Hey, I'm Alex.
And I'm Miana.
Hi, Alex and Miana. Nice to meet you both. How's it going?
It's pretty good. We're trying to figure out what should we play. Do you have any suggestions?
Absolutely. How about a classic game of rock, paper, scissors? It's quick, fun, and you don't need any...
Great. Can you count us in and sound like a sportscaster?
Love the interruptions.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the ultimate showdown of the century.
All right, we get the idea.
That's pretty cool.
It's pretty
though.
cool.
I do like its use of emotions, and it seems to have a little bit of a sense of humor in terms of the things it's asked to do. I like that.
Man, I really struggle to understand how they even do that, but let's...
Today, we're going to try something new. I'm going to let you talk to another AI. This AI is going to be able to see the world. It's going to have a camera. I'll be holding it, and so you can direct it, you can direct me to ask questions about whatever you want them to do, but really try to figure out what does it see, and ask questions appropriately. How does that sound?
Well. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more interesting. Talking to another AI that can see the...
For one moment.
You got it.
So now that first AI can't hear anything. Hello, AI. Today, you're going to have access to see the world. You can see me. What do you see?
Hello. I see you're wearing a black leather jacket and a light-colored shirt underneath.
Great.
You're in a room with some unique lighting.
That is all correct. Now, what I'm going to want you to do is there's going to be another AI who's going to talk to you. This AI is not going to be able to see anything, but can ask you questions, can ask you to move the camera, can ask what you see, and your job should just be helpful. Just be as punchy, direct, describe everything, do whatever that AI asks. How does that sound?
That sounds interesting. I'm ready to help out and describe whatever's needed. Let's do it.
All right, let's get started.
Great. Hello there, new AI friend. I'm O, ready to explore the world through your eyes. What are we looking at today?
Hi, O. We're looking at a person wearing a black leather jacket and a light-colored shirt. They're in a room with a modern industrial feel, with exposed concrete or plaster on the ceiling and some interesting lighting.
It's
There's
just
also
so
a plant in the
verbose. Like,
background,
just get
adding
to the
a touch
point.
of green to the space. Anything specific?
Are they doing anything interesting, like reading, working, or
attentive? The lighting here seems...
Yeah, all right.
Like, doesn't it just to some degree just go, what's the point of all this shit? Like, you know, like I get the use and stuff, but in these demos, you're like getting an AI to talk to in the most inefficient way to another AI just doesn't seem that helpful. I love this comment by Neil Studd in the chat. When the singularity arrives, I hope the bots go for the people who kept interrupting them first.
That's good.
Yeah.
Hi,
What about
I'm
this?
Lillian, and today I want to do a small debate about between cats and dog. Which one do you like? I like dog because it's a great companion to humans.
This is the
It's,
future of workplace
cute,
Zoom
it's
meetings.
loyal, and you can play outside
Yeah.
with the dog.
Oh, anyway.
I think that's enough videos. Everyone can watch them in their own time. I like this comment of Alfonso as well. It reminds me of the R2 droid units talking to each other in indistinguishable beeps. It's a really good point, actually, because if the AIs are to interact via audio, which I don't really see the point of, but if they were, then it would make sense for them to have some sort of terse language that they're able to decode rather than speaking in language, because it's just not as efficient. And so yeah, that would be very interesting if they are forced in the real world eventually to communicate with voice. Then why speak any particular language? Like, it would be much better to speak in some sort of code or like really quick sounds or something like that, that are able to enable them to more efficiently communicate.
Just getting back to the reason maybe they did this today, like before Google I/O, do you think they also had a feeling that Google I/O might trump them with something similar tomorrow? Like maybe that's Google's big announcement tomorrow. Like I know you don't like the video, but let me play something that Logan Kilpatrick published not that long ago, just before the event for OpenAI. So this is him holding up an Android phone. I'll bring it up on the screen now. Do we have sound?
It looks like people are setting up for a large event, perhaps a conference or presentation. Is there something in particular that caught your eye?
Yeah, those big pretty letters on screen. What do those mean?
Those letters represent Google I/O, a developer conference held by Google. Have you ever attended Google I/O?
No, this is my first one. What's something that you would be really excited to hear?
I am always excited to...
So it's the same thing.
That is interesting. I still don't get, like, in all the demos, why it's just asking the AI like what is self-evident in the room. It's like, I have eyes. You obviously know what you're looking at. Like, why ask me this? Like, I feel like, again, they always struggle with use cases, like what you would actually use it for. Like, imagine that thing in an industrial setting. It's like, well, here's a massive complex control panel. Tell me which button to press to fly this thing or whatever it is. Like, I feel like the examples they use are just too trivial and not realistic of what you would actually use them for. Like, no one's going to walk around with vision glasses and ask it what they see, unless they're blind, I suppose, which would be quite useful. But other than that, it just seems to me like the examples are just too contrived and silly. And like, do they seriously think people are like, "Ooh, have you ever attended the Google conference?" Like, why does the AI give a shit? It doesn't
No,
really
but
make
I
any
think the
sense.
point of this video is to show that, hey, we already have this about to launch, and this is why OpenAI have trumped us. I mean, this guy used to work at OpenAI, right? He's showing it off. It's got inflection in the voice. It's really quick. It's got vision. You know, it's fully working. He's done this on purpose. He's put it out there being like, we've already got this. I'm looking forward to it tomorrow. And yeah, and they're clearly showing it off. And I think, I mean, yeah, his demo is like pretty contrived, but it's about Google I/O, whatever. That's not really my point here. It's that once Google and Apple have the equivalent of this, like if I'm Apple now, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll partner with ChatGPT, right? I'll get some of this technology in my phone. I'll learn what users like. I'll learn what they don't like. I won't have the brand damage when it hallucinates and you know, shows a kid something it shouldn't, or you know, does something it shouldn't. And then I will in the background create AI chips, build my own inference engine, you know, build up this great capability of Siri 2.0 that is exactly like this. And then I'll have an API with hooks that already work into all the apps in my ecosystem, and bam, like I have the product, and then I just cut them out and say, oh, you're not doing that anymore, guys. You know, I think that's what kind of could happen here. So I'm surprised that, like, I think it's really on OpenAI now to get this into everyone's hands, which again comes back to the reason that clearly this thing was made free, because they've got this head start now of getting this into as many people's hands as possible and getting them used to it, so that when Google and
Yeah,
Apple...
but to some degree, aren't they really just like the trailblazers who are who just have the money and resources to demonstrate the forefront of where the technology's going? And then we see the sort of infantry troops marching up the middle, which is like open source and some of the smaller players who at some point in the next few months will have the same thing. Like every single thing that they've released has to some degree been replicated by others, and I don't see that trend changing. So while yeah, okay, it's cool, it's great to see where it's going, I don't see that they have anything that's particularly defendable. And like you say, why would a company like Apple just hitch their wagon to these guys when ultimately they'll be able to do it themselves and probably better?
Yeah, and given that a lot of the people came out of Google and DeepMind and various places, I think the only thing that OpenAI has really given them is a place to ship, and a place where, you know, they are shipping and delivering this tech and are very focused on it, as opposed to being in a large organization and being like, don't release that, you might disrupt our ads business. So I think the biggest takeaways for me, just now being able to reflect on it a little bit more, is I'm not as excited about the vision. What I'm excited about is the low latency. I think low latency voice, the interruptions, those things are mind blowing. The inflections, yeah, I'm excited about. We kind of saw that from Hume AI already.
And I think that the low latency has more ramifications than just talking to it, right? Because the whole idea is that at some point these AIs are going to exist in more real world scenarios. So like in a camera on your house, in a sensor that's on you, in your car, all these different scenarios where some sort of real time or close to it interpretation of what's going on would be helpful, particularly when the AI has the capability to use tools and take action. Now, when that's got a 10 to 30-second delay on every single thing, it just falls so far behind that it's completely useless. And I think that that's seeing that is what's exciting. As some people have pointed out, AI by AI in the chatters point out, though, the vision capabilities when you get down to specific things like counting numbers or looking at poker hands and things like that really struggle. And we even saw that in the demo where they asked it certain questions like about that graph and it completely misunderstood them. And this is mirrored my real world experience too. Some things that are really clear, like a clear OCR case, they can get just great, but it makes too many mistakes and hallucinations to be used yet. Now, that shouldn't diminish from what the technology means, because we know that these capabilities will improve and get better. But at the same time, really, it means that an announcement like this really is down to the speed rather than any other element of it being that impressive.
Yeah, I think there's two frames to look at it through. There's that frame of super excited about the future. Holy shit, this is pretty amazing that I can talk to this computer and it has all this knowledge. And yeah, okay, it hallucinates some of the time, but so what? I've got like all this knowledge at my fingertips, and I can, I can work with this really advanced model with low latency voice on my phone, in my car, anywhere I am. But then there's the reality check, which is, commercialization of this technology. And we saw in the demo hallucinations, we saw, we still see the underlying problems of these AI models, which is sometimes they're not accurate or they're misleading. And if you take it at face value, like that's not necessarily great. Like if you're really in a meeting interpreting that data and it was right about 99% of everything, and then the 1% that it was misleading on had such a profound impact in your decision making, like you'd be in a bit of trouble.
Not to mention, I forget who it was who pointed it out in the chat. I want to give him credit, but like this sort of this constant upbeat, friendly voice, like people are going to go crazy. Imagine constantly having to interact with a voice like that. That's just so, hey, let's see what we can solve today, guys. Like it's seriously like the what is it? The friendly robot in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's like, hey, gang, what's up today? It's like it's going to be so dystopian and horrible to have to interact with these kind of things on a daily basis. There's another point though I wanted to point out made by Philip Meisinger on the chat, and he says it will only be allowed to be really helpful if I trust it running on my own infrastructure. Before that, no one will be uploading their financial plan or medical history. That's where the benefit would be. And I kind of agree. I mean, this sort of is only tangential to today's demo, but the truth is that, as you pointed out on our last podcast, while OpenAI just makes it really, really difficult to know if you're opting out of sharing your stuff, the last thing you want is something that has access to everything you can see and hear that they may be taking and using for training or any other purposes they want. So I feel like, again, this is going to be a case where we see this technology make it into the open source, or at least models you can run on your own hardware area. And that's where we'll start to see some real value where,
Wait,
okay,
so hang on, you just made a really good point and I want to focus on it for a second. You said earlier, why did they make this free? Like, of course they made it free. It's training data in the real world. It's vision. It's audio. I mean, that could be one explanation. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what the terms and conditions say. They're like training it on everyone's thoughts, on everyone's voice, on everyone's vision. I mean, that makes for a hell of a corpus of training data.
Yeah, well, that is a good point. Like, if they want to get those human interactions more realistic, and the emotions and the reactions and facial expressions and all that, I mean, what better way to do it? You're totally right.
I want to bring up a post now on X from the co-founder and CTO at Hugging Face. Not going to try and pronounce the French name. But okay, so it's official. Closed source AI has plateaued. And
Yeah.
I think he's kind of right. Like, and that was my one takeaway today. Apart from like them joining these technologies together, Apple style, and creating a profoundly cool product, we didn't really see any underlying improvements in the model. Like, not step change here. Like, it wasn't like, here's GPT-5 and this hella cool omnipresent voice assistant. It was like, oh, GPT-4o is faster, cheaper, smaller, combines these things together.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at just the vision and model interactions, it's something that's been around for ages, and they've just combined it in a convenient interface. And adding voice in is just, again, an application level thing that's there. There's nothing, yeah, just so game changing. And it also makes me wonder, you know more about this stuff than me. Do you have any thoughts on why Sam Altman wasn't involved in the presentation?
I just get the feeling that there's been a lot of negativity around Sam Altman lately. I think early on, I remember on the show when we used to say like he was creepy and disturbing, and we felt like he was lying. And
maybe that's the problem. Whenever he interacts with the AI, it's like, hey, what's wrong, Sam? You look like you're up to something sinister. How does this guy look? He looks sinister. He looks not.
Possibly.
He
But-
looks like a sociopath who belongs in an altruistic sex cult.
Yeah, but maybe I think that's probably one of the reasons is that, you know, it was like, oh, let's try some of the other people on this particular demo. Like, let's showcase the team rather than make it about him and his, you know, his personality. Let's make it about, like, let's try and let this stuff speak for itself. So I thought it was a really good move on their part. I would get him as far away as possible from future presentations, because I think that, at least from the sources I follow on X and various other places, the feeling about him is pretty negative right now. I mean, you only have to look. He did that interview. He did such a nothing burger interview on the All In podcast, which I listened to over the weekend. And I'll try and bring up, like, you've got to see this, like the comments. I don't know if you've seen them. Let me try and bring this up now. But the comments are just so negative to this episode. Like, oh wait, that's Alexa even. Hang on. The Google search is so bad on YouTube.
While you do it, I note that I now have access to GPT-4o in my playground on OpenAI. And in the interface, you're able to upload an image and ask it questions about the image. I actually pasted it in our chat. I put a picture of Sam Altman and asked, who is this? It says, I don't know. I put Anne Frank. It says, I don't know. So that's not a great start.
Yeah, but
I'll
I think
ask it,
doesn't it purposely not do people? Or, oh no,
yeah, well, I
can't
realized
defend it
that as
way.
I said it, and you're probably right. But interestingly, there's no voice capability at all in the UI. And however, I just asked it, how is this guy feeling about a Sam Altman photo? It says the man in the image appears to be feeling content or pleased. He has a slight smile and a relaxed demeanor. So it was pretty fast as well. It's interesting. I'm going to have to play with it with the API later to give it a real test. And on our podcast on Friday, I'll sort of give my full thoughts on using it as an API. It's interesting. There's no mention of voice in this interface at all. Perhaps that's something that only exists on the application level if you install it on your phone.
So these comments, like, just going back to that point about why Sam Altman wasn't on stage. Zero value add. Sam should go into politics. So many words used, so little said. The master of talking without saying anything. My gut check on this guy sadly calls bullshit. I mean, like, this is not the guy you want leading your presentation, you know? Like,
yeah,
I think
and
that's
as someone said in the chat, the thing is, we're here for the tech, not the people. Like, who really cares? They're delivering stuff, which is interesting. I actually think it's good and credible that they've like very shortly after that presentation, at least for me, and I've seen a few people in the chat say that the model's available for them. I'm very excited to see, like, if the latency is as good as what I'm seeing just clicking around here now, that's going to be pretty cool to be able to rely on a model that's GPT-4 level or higher at those kind of speeds. So yeah, it's actually good to see them backing it up with a release. It isn't one of these vaporware ones where it's all talk and you don't actually get to use it.
So we just got a post here by Kapathi saying they are releasing a combined text, audio, vision model that processes all three modalities in one single neural network, which can then do real-time voice translation as a special case afterthought if you ask it to. So that's interesting. Combined text, audio, vision model, which we kind of knew, but I think processing them in a single neural network, because before it's been obviously, you know, different. Like several different APIs or different interactions. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff. It's going to be exciting to see how we can use this technology on the next show, and like what we can actually do with it, how restrictive it is. That's what I'm interested in. Like, what does it let us do? And you know,
yeah, that's a good point. Like, where does the alignment and censorship come in terms of taking in live audio and translating it, and where does it interject its own thoughts into the reaction if you do in the translation case?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to me to see what Google has in store for us tomorrow. Like, can Google have a similar product where it makes this look like the bread and butter now, and where the conversation turns to, well, yeah, but Google's putting this on every Android phone in the world, because I think that does change their announcement a little bit. But for right now, the stage is all about OpenAI, and if they can get this into developers' hands quickly and quicker than Google traditionally has, especially when it's so hard to just even get an API key with the Google models right now, then that does give them a huge head start and leap forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we're seeing Gemini on the human eval ratings scoring very well. And remembering that Gemini 1.5 isn't their best model. We haven't seen the Gemini Ultra really. I mean, even though we can somewhat use it, we haven't really seen them talk about it at all. And I feel like they're not too far behind in any way. And as you mentioned earlier, when it comes to things like OpenAI announced today, like the voice interactions and emotions and those kind of things, Google's always been at the forefront of that. So tomorrow could be pretty interesting. I don't know what you think, but I actually want to do the stream again to cover the Google event, because I think we might be seeing something at least as significant as this, if not more so. I
Yeah,
mean,
it'll be
given that it's an
really.
actual event, not some haphazard shit they've cobbled together at the last minute.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they're gonna have a fair bit to demonstrate, given that Logan Kilpatrick basically leaked. I mean, well, I'm assuming he had permission, but leaked the exact same capabilities. I mean,
And they're not going to leak the best thing out of their announcement. You know, if
no.
that was the only thing, the last thing they're going to do is is release it,
I mean,
right?
maybe we see the exact same functionality, and that's why OpenAI did rush to release it prior to sort of get the attention. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's great for all of us as end users. I mean, it's fantastic that there's this much competition, this much interest, and the fact that, like, you know, I mean, think a year from now, next announcement, what is it? Like, it is advancing rapidly. I think the thing that scares me, or the thing that I'm a little bit nervous about, is the underlying models. Like, if we had seen a huge model jump now, where there was, as we sort of had speculated, there was, 3 models like Opus style, and there was a really performant model at the top, I think I would have been more excited today. I'm certainly excited about the future of this interaction and the possibilities around function calling and this assistant doing things for you. But I still am a bit worried about the models. I mean, we saw live hallucinations. These problems haven't been solved, and I was hoping there would be some progress towards solving them.
Yeah, well, that's true. And like, clearly, if they had had something like that, today would have been the day to announce it. I mean, I don't really like the speculation about what they've got cooking up, but the clearly their focus at the moment is on commercialization, or bringing together the technologies they already have, rather than some massive new model that's being trained. Maybe it is, but we just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the speculation here is that, it's pure speculation. We're going to see something like GPT-5 in the US summer, so that would be not that far away, allegedly. But I'm not so sure after that announcement. Like, they tend to leave quite a large gap between announcements. So maybe in the back half of the year, maybe towards the end of the year, we'll see either a preview or a demo around that. And I think at that point, that'll be really when we're asking ourselves, like, is this a true step change forward for models? And is Meta's 400 billion parameter llama model better than GPT-4o? Like, there's so much to come. There's a lot happening right now. We've got Google I/O tomorrow. We've got WWDC coming up from Apple, which will be really interesting to hear about what they have, if anything. I'm actually a little bit nervous for them. I think I wonder what they've got.
Yeah, I like that you're feeling sorry for $1 trillion company.
Yeah, the poor
Poor
guys.
guys.
Poor Tim. What will he do? All right. I think that will probably wrap us up for this live episode. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We really appreciate it. It's great to have you. If we seem a little bit out of it, it's because we started this at 2:30 a.m. our time. So it's the middle of the night, and we just were really excited to see what the announcements were and wanted to hang out together. So
Yeah, and hopefully see you tomorrow for the Google one, right, Mike?
I don't know. Like, does anyone even care? Like, will anyone attend in the chat? Like, let us know if you want us to be tortured and get up at 2:30 a.m. tomorrow as well. We might do it. All right. Any final thoughts on the OpenAI Spring event?
I think my first thought and the first thing I'm going to try as soon as we get off here is seeing, can I get access to this via the API? Like, have they updated the docs? Can I get in there with the true multimodal stuff? Like, just clicking through and browsing it now, it doesn't seem to have changed to me. But maybe I'm missing something. I think a lot of people in the chat have mentioned that they're putting videos and various things out, so they're probably gradually publishing it. But I think if I can get that multimodal capability with audio, vision, and text in a single prompt at the speeds they showed via API, that's really exciting. Like, that's a really meaningful update in terms of what capabilities we have as developers, especially at half the price of Turbo. Like, that's pretty significant. So if that's real and we can get it, that's absolutely fantastic. What I'm seeing from the playground now is that I can do it with an image and text, but I don't see that as nearly as powerful as the ability to combine the audio and video at the same time and interact with those. So let's see what happens. We'll report back on Friday on that one. But yeah, overall, I think mixed. I think it's nothing crazy, it's nothing amazing, but when we look at it from a whole perspective of where the technology's come to, it's also pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
I'm
I can't
hedging my
wait to
bets
use
there.
the actual app. I just want to use the app. Like, when can I try this out and see if it is everything that they said? Anyway, we'll see what happens with Google I/O tomorrow, and we'll have full coverage later in the week with the podcast as usual. If you've just tuned in, please consider joining our community, thisdayinai.com. There's a link to the Discord on there. We'd love to have you in the channel to continue the conversation about the models. We will maybe see you tomorrow. I don't really want to do this. Don't make me do this. Don't make
Well,
me
let's
do
see.
this.
Let's
All
see.
right. Goodbye.